This lesson is about properties of trapezoids. The goal is to verify and use properties of trapezoids, and the standard is geometry, similarity, right triangles, trig, number 5. What you should understand from this lesson is that the angles, the sides, and the diagonals of a trapezoid have certain properties. So talking about trapezoids and their properties, where are you on the scale? Are you 1, I don't get it, meaning you don't really know much about trapezoids and their properties, or 2, you sort of get it, you've heard about the properties but you're not real sure, or 3, yeah, you know about it, or 4, you're so good you could stand up here and teach me about the properties of trapezoids. Write the number on your top of your notes. First of all, a trapezoid is a quadrilateral. That means it has 4 sides. That means that the sum of the interior angles is 360 degrees. It is a quadrilateral that has exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. The parallel sides are called the bases. Then the other 2 sides, they are non-parallel. They're called the legs. Now the legs, a lot of times, are not the same unless they are an isosceles trapezoid. Now the 2 angles that share the base are called base angles, and a trapezoid has 2 pairs of base angles. Here is 1 pair of base angles, and there's another pair of base angles. An isosceles triangle, again, has parallel bases, but their legs are congruent. They're exactly the same. And the angles of an isosceles trapezoid have some unique properties. Which brings us to this theorem. If a quadrilateral is an isosceles trapezoid, then each pair of base angles is congruent. So, if TRAP is an isosceles trapezoid, notice these are our base angles. They are congruent. Our other pair of base angles is at the bottom, and they are also congruent. Just remember, they would add up to 360 degrees. The first problem says that quadrilateral WXYZ is an isosceles trapezoid, and the measurement of angle W is 2Z plus 88. The question is, what is the value of Z? All right, well, if you notice, angle X and angle W are a pair of base angles, which means they are congruent. They are the same. So I'm going to put them equal to each other. 132 equals 2Z plus 88. I subtract 88 from both sides, and I get 2Z equals 44. When I divide both sides by 2, I get Z equals 22. So the value of Z is 22. And if I replace 22 in for Z, 2 times 22 is 44, and 44 plus 88 is 132, which makes it congruent to angle X. Here's practice 1. Quadrilateral EFGH is an isosceles trapezoid, and the measurement of angle H is 6C plus 66. What is the value of C? The next theorem states that if a quadrilateral is an isosceles triangle, then its diagonals are congruent. So if ABCD is an isosceles trapezoid, then the diagonals AC is congruent to BD. All right, the question says, so the problem is, quadrilateral FGHI is an isosceles trapezoid. FH is 5Z minus 54, and GI equals Z plus 98. What is the value of Z? Well, we know that the diagonals are congruent. That means we can make them equal to each other. So I have 5Z minus 54 equals Z plus 98. I subtract 1Z from both sides. I'm left with 4Z minus 54 equals 98. I add 54 to both sides, and I get 4Z equals 152. I divide both sides by 4, which gives me Z equals 38. So the value of Z is 38. And if I replace 38 in both algebraic expressions, I would come up with the same answer. The answer happens to be 136, but check it just to make sure. Practice problem 2. Quadrilateral DEFG is an isosceles trapezoid. DF equals 5U plus 34, and EG equals 9U plus 14. What is the value of U? The next theorem states that if a quadrilateral is a trapezoid, then the midsegment is parallel to the bases. Here's the midsegment. Now remember, a midsegment cuts the legs into two equal sections. And the midsegment, because it cuts it in half and it's parallel, it is half of the sum of the bases. So if you add the top base and the bottom base and you divide it by 2, you get the length of the midsegment. On the other hand, if you take 2 times the midsegment, it is the same thing as taking half of the sum of the bases, which you're going to see in a minute, because that's what you're going to be doing more of, is taking 2 times the midsegment. Okay, here I have a trapezoid, and RU gives me my midsegment. And it's the midsegment of the legs QS, and there's my legs TV. So if QV, that's my base here, is 25, and ST is 41, what is RU? Okay, well, we said that if you take the bases and add them together and divide them in half, you get the length of the midsegment. So the length of the midsegment is, the length of the midsegment RU is 33. Here's a little different problem. This one says UX is the midsegment of the trapezoid. If TY, which is a base, is 36 and UX is 57, they want to know what the length of this other base is. So here's what you have to do when you know the midsegment and one of the bases. First of all, you take the length of the midsegment. In this case, it's 57. And you multiply it times 2. That's 114. Once you have doubled it, you're going to subtract whatever base they give you. It doesn't matter whether they give you the short base or the long base, you are going to subtract that base. So I'm going to subtract 36 from 114, and I get 78. So the length of the longer base is 78. Now I'm going to prove that to you here. So I'm saying that if the short base is 36 and the long base is 78, when I add them up and divide it by 2, I should get 57. So let's check that out. 36 plus 78 is 114. And when I divide that in half, I get 57. So I know that the length of the longer base, or the length of VW, is 78. So one more time, when you're given the midsegment and a base, multiply the midsegment by 2 and subtract the other segment. Practice 3. UX is the midsegment of this trapezoid. If VW is 30 and UX is 42, what is YZ? Practice 4. If UV is 39 and QT is 54, what is RS? Alright, these are the kinds of problems that are going to give you the most problems. So listen very carefully, and you may have to watch this more than one time. Here I have a trapezoid, and they're giving me the length of all three, both bases and the midsegment. And they are all three algebraic expressions. Now, if you remember back earlier, I told you that 2 times the midsegment is the same thing as half the sum of the bases. So it's easier, I think it's easier to multiply something times 2 than it is to find half of something. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to find the midsegment, which is PS. That's where I'm going to start. And I'm going to multiply both the letter and the number times 2. Well, if I have a Z and another Z, I have 2Z. And if I have a negative 4 times 2, I have negative 8. And that is the same thing as the other side, which is, I'm just going to add these two sides, the two bases together. All right, so just add them together. So negative 3Z plus 1Z is negative 2Z. And all I have left over is the 92, the plus 92, because there's nothing to go with the Z. All right, negative 2Z is the smallest, so I'm going to add these 2Z to both sides. So I have 4Z minus 8 equals 92. I'm going to add 8 to both sides, and I'm left with 4Z equals 100. Divide both sides by 4, and Z equals 25. Okay, once again, you have to multiply the midsegment times 2. You don't multiply the bases times anything, you just add them together. Because adding them together is the same thing as multiplying the midsegment times 2. Okay, so without me writing down all the numbers, I'm just going to give you, I plugged in 25 into each one of those algebraic expressions. And starting with the shorter base, I got 17, the midsegment was 21, and the longer base was 25. So you can do the math, add up the two bases, divide it by 2, and you'll come up with 21. So the value of Z does equal 25. Here's practice 5. You have your two bases, QR, UT, and you have your mid-segment, which is just SV. Now remember, we're going to multiply your mid-segment times 2, which is going to be easy. It's just going to be 2x. Then you're going to take your other two bases and add them together. You're going to add 2x plus 2x. That'll equal 4x. Then you're going to take negative 56 plus negative 36. And whatever that is, you're going to put that equal to those negative 2, or to those 2x's. And that's going to be your equation. It'll be 2x equals 4x minus whatever 56 and 36 is. And your final practice problem. Again, you are given all three bases, the two bases and the mid-segment. RU is your mid-segment. Be sure to multiply both of those by 2. Add the two bases together. Set them equal to each other. And solve for y. Alright, so where are you now on this scale after this lesson? Are you still, still don't get anything about these, or I kind of sort of get it, I'm not real sure, or yeah, I'm good at this, or I'm so good now I could teach somebody how to do this. Write this at the bottom of your notes and go do your assignment after you check your practice problem answers. And for those of you that speak German, auf Wiedersehen.